image like no other, inspiring decades of research and debate. The Shroud of Turin, that's a piece of history, and it has an ongoing puzzle for scientists.
3 genetics labs just sequenced DNA from the Shroud of Turin. Then, all 3 went quiet. No press conferences, no published rebuttals, no explanations, just silence. Because the genetic material pulled from the blood on that cloth doesn't match any known population alive today. Some of the markers are so ancient they belong to a lineage that vanished from the Earth thousands of years ago. And the DNA itself, the actual structure of the chromosomes, was shattered. Not degraded the way old DNA breaks down. Shattered, like something detonated inside every cell at the same moment. Each lab ran the results twice. They thought their own machines were broken. The machines were fine. The DNA was impossible. But this story doesn't start in a genetics lab. It starts in 1978, inside a sealed chamber in a medieval cathedral, thick with the smell of old stone and stale incense. 40 of the sharpest scientific minds on the planet, physicists, chemists, spectroscopists, a NASA-trained photographer, crowded around a 14-foot strip of ancient linen with one job: find the paint, find the forgery, kill the legend. 120 hours later, they hadn't found a single brushstroke. This is not a prayer circle. This is a cold case. And by the end of this investigation, you're going to see the molecular evidence that whoever bled onto this cloth didn't just die. They were destroyed at the cellular level by something we still don't have a name for. The Shroud of Turin isn't ancient history. It's an open forensic file, and it just got reopened. Before we get to the DNA that broke those labs, you need to meet the man whose entire worldview collapsed inside that room. Barry Schwartz, technical photographer, Jewish, worked with agencies including NASA. He was the guy they brought to document the fraud. High-resolution proof that some medieval craftsman had fooled the world with a clever painting. Schwartz joked with his team on the flight over. Free trip to Italy. Find the fake by Tuesday. Wine by Wednesday. He never drank that wine. The moment they unrolled the cloth under harsh fluorescent light, the room went quiet. 14 feet of yellowed linen. Faint. Ghostly. The outline of a man covered in wounds. Schwartz set up his cameras and started hunting, millimeter by millimeter, for the tiny ridges and pigment deposits that every painted surface leaves behind. Nothing. No brush marks. No pigment granules. No binding medium. Not under white light. Not under ultraviolet. Not under infrared. He later said the silence in that room was suffocating, like the cloth was daring them to explain it. Then the VP-8 changed everything. The VP-8 image analyzer was a machine NASA built to convert flat satellite photographs into 3-dimensional terrain maps of other planets. Feed it a normal photograph of a human face, and the result is a distorted mess. Because regular photos don't carry actual depth data. Light and shadow in a painting are artistic choices, not physical measurements. They fed the shroud into the VP-8, a perfect 3-dimensional human body lifted off the screen. Every brightness value on that image mapped to an exact distance between the cloth and the body beneath it, as if the linen had recorded a man's physical shape the way a photocopier records a page pressed against glass. Schwartz stared at that screen for a long time. He didn't say a word. It got worse under the microscope. The image exists only on the outermost shell of each fiber, a layer measured in micrometers, thinner than a red blood cell. Scrape it with a razor, and it vanishes. White linen underneath. Nothing soaked through. Nothing penetrated. No paint, no dye, no ink in any century of human history leaves a mark that shallow. The only hypothesis that survived peer review? A sudden, violent burst of radiant energy, intense enough to dehydrate the cellulose of linen at the molecular level, but so brief it didn't burn the fabric. No machine on Earth can replicate that today. Not one. But the image was only the beginning, because the blood hiding in those threads was about to turn a physics mystery into a crime scene. For 20 years, the blood was the skeptic's best weapon. Bright red stains scattered across the linen, vivid, almost wet-looking. And anyone with a semester of forensic science knows that's wrong. Dried blood darkens in hours. Ancient blood turns to black powder. Red blood on a 2,000-year-old cloth screams forgery. Some amateur with a pot of cinnabar paint faking wound marks for a gullible medieval crowd. Good theory. One problem. A biochemist named Alan Adler destroyed it. Adler wasn't a believer. He was a blood chemist, cold, clinical, obsessed with molecular degradation. He ran the Shroud's blood samples expecting to confirm the paint hypothesis and close the file. Instead, he found something that made him pick up the phone and call Schwartz in the middle of the night. Bilirubin. Massive, abnormal concentrations of it. Here's what that means, and this is the hinge of the entire investigation. When a human body is subjected to hours of extreme, escalating physical torture, the liver starts to fail. As it shuts down, it floods the bloodstream with bilirubin, a yellow compound that bonds permanently to hemoglobin. That chemical bond acts like a lock. It freezes the blood red, permanently. A century from now, 2,000 years from now, it will never darken. The red wasn't a mistake. It was a molecular timestamp of a death so savage that the man's organs were collapsing while his heart was still beating. And the crime scene got worse from there. Human hemoglobin, human albumin, human immunoglobulin, over 100 lash marks mapped across the back, consistent with a Roman flagrum, a leather whip with multiple tails, each one tipped with jagged lead or bone, designed to flay skin from muscle with every stroke. Puncture wounds through both wrists. A gaping lateral wound in the ribcage, matching the width of a Roman infantry lance. Microscopic soil particles near the feet, containing a calcium carbonate signature that matches the limestone bedrock of ancient Jerusalem. This cloth was a sealed crime scene, 2 millennia old, preserved in thread. But here's the detail that still keeps forensic scientists awake. The blood soaked into the fibres first. The image came after. Wherever blood had penetrated the linen, the image is completely absent. That energy event, whatever it was, stopped dead at the edge of every bloodstain. The body bled. The blood bonded to the cloth. And then something happened that printed a 3-dimensional photograph around the wounds without touching them. Which piece of this evidence do you think cracks the case? Hold that answer, because now we get to the part that silenced 3 laboratories. When sequencing technology finally advanced enough to pull genetic material from the Shroud's fibers, researchers expected contamination noise. Centuries of handling, a genetic junkyard of European DNA from every priest, conservator, and pilgrim who'd ever breathed near the cloth. The results came back, and the room went silent. The sequences extracted from deep inside the fiber matrix, not the surface, not the handling layer, but woven into the threads themselves, carried genetic markers from South Asia, North Africa, and the ancient Middle East. Some of those markers were so archaic, they belonged to population groups that vanished from the earth thousands of years ago. If a medieval European forger fabricated this cloth, the dominant DNA should scream Western European. It doesn't. The genetic fingerprint reads like a census of the ancient Near East. And then there was the fragmentation. The DNA from the bloodstains wasn't just degraded, it was shattered, torn apart at the chromosomal level in a pattern that doesn't match natural aging. Normal degradation is slow, even, predictable, like a book yellowing page by page. This looked like every cell had detonated from the inside. Geneticists associate that pattern with one thing: catastrophic biological trauma so extreme it destroys the genetic code itself. 3 independent laboratories verified the results. Every one initially rejected the data as instrument error. They recalibrated, retested, reran. The numbers held. Every sample, every pass, every lab. The silence from the scientific establishment since then has been deafening. No published rebuttal, no alternative model. Just quiet. And that should unsettle you. Right now, today. Because every year our instruments get sharper, our sequencing deeper, our imaging more precise. And every time we aim better technology at this cloth, it doesn't get simpler. It gets more impossible. As if it was engineered to reveal itself only as fast as we're capable of understanding it. We can put robots on Mars, We can photograph a black hole 65 million light-years away, but we cannot make a copy of this cloth. We cannot explain the image. We cannot explain the blood. And we cannot account for DNA that belongs to a vanished world, obliterated by an energy event that modern physics doesn't have a chapter for. Barry Schwartz, the Jewish skeptic who flew to Italy to kill a legend, spent the rest of his life archiving every piece of data from that investigation, for free. He once told an interviewer that he went looking for a forgery and found something that looked a lot like proof of God instead. So here's my question, and I want you to sit with it. If the bilirubin proves hours of catastrophic torture, if the DNA confirms ancient Middle Eastern origin, if the chromosomes were ripped apart from the inside by an unknown force, what flashed a three-dimensional image onto burial linen without burning it, in the same instant it destroyed human DNA? Type "case closed" if you believe science will crack this in our lifetime. Type "beyond science" if you think we're staring at evidence for something no laboratory was ever built to measure. If this is the first time you've heard what the raw forensic data actually says, not the headlines, not the hot takes, the data, subscribe to Hidden Latitude. We investigate the cases the mainstream won't touch. I'll see you on the next one.